She came home wearing a man's jacket. That's how this story starts. Not with some dramatic text message or suspicious phone call, but with a gray North Face jacket I had never seen before, hanging on the back of our kitchen chair like it lived there. I just finished making dinner, some lazy weeknight thing with chicken and frozen vegetables, and I was plating it up when she walked through the door. Rain in her hair, heels in one hand, that jacket slung casually over her other shoulder like she didn't even notice she had it. Tessa never forgets anything. She never leaves a cup out of place, never forgets her dry cleaning, never brings home some random article of clothing that doesn't belong to her. I looked at it, looked at her, then looked back at it. She didn't say anything at first, just kissed my cheek like usual, tossed her shoes by the door, and headed straight for the fridge. I waited. I watched. I asked, whose jacket? She didn't even pause, just grabbed a water bottle, took a sip, then glanced back like I'd asked about the weather. Oh, she said, too casually. A client let me borrow it. It was raining, and I parked too far. There are certain lies that don't even try to hide. That was one of them. We live in the city. Nobody lets you borrow their jacket. This isn't the suburbs where neighbors care. And even if they did, you don't bring it home and throw it over your own chair. You return it. You thank them. You hand it back at the lobby. The lie sat between us like a third person at the table. I didn't push it. I just said, right, and kept eating. She didn't touch her food. Said she wasn't hungry. Said she had a headache. Said she was going to take a shower. I stared at the jacket. She walked away. I didn't say anything else, and maybe that's where I messed up. But my gut was already turning, and I needed to be sure. I don't react anymore. I calculate. I waited until the water started running upstairs. Then I went to the jacket. Checked the pockets. The left one was empty. The right one had a movie ticket stub, Kendall Square Cinema, 3:10 p.m., Theater 6, Row J. She'd told me she was in a meeting until 5. I flipped the collar and found a faint scent of cologne, not the kind I wear, something heavier, a musky, overconfident scent that made my chest clench. I could have confronted her right there, but no. I wanted more. Needed more. This wasn't going to be a guessing game. I'd dealt with betrayal before, not romantic, but enough to know that jumping in too early just means you miss all the important parts. I put the jacket back exactly how it was, sat back down, and finished my cold dinner like I didn't already feel like I'd swallowed broken glass. When she came back downstairs in her robe, hair wet and face clean, she looked like the woman I married. That's what pissed me off most. She smiled like she wasn't hiding anything, leaned over and asked, "You mind if I go to yoga tomorrow night? There's a new instructor I've been wanting to try." I didn't even blink. "Sure," I said. "Take your time." She kissed me again and curled up on the couch like everything was normal. I watched her scroll on her phone, laugh at something on Instagram, then get bored and flip to some show about murder investigations. That's what got me. The audacity to sit there and watch a TV while you're lying to your own husband 5 feet away. I made up my mind that night. I wasn't going to be the clueless in this story. I was going to be the guy who saw it coming and got ahead of it. Next day, I followed her. I told her I had to go into the studio early to prep a session. She left at 6:30 for her supposed yoga class. I waited 10 minutes, then grabbed my keys and tailed her car. She didn't go to the yoga studio. Didn't even get on the main road in that direction. She drove across town to a street full of brownstones and parked in front of a red brick building I'd never seen before. No signs. No studio. Just a plain-ass door with a keypad and a camera over it. She looked around once, then typed something in and slipped inside. I waited an hour in my car. Rain started up again, just a drizzle, but enough to make everything feel 10 times heavier. I almost left. Almost told myself I was overthinking. Then she came out. Not alone. He followed right behind her, tall, smug, maybe early 40s, hair slicked back like he still thought he was 20. She laughed at something he said and touched his chest, then walked with him toward his car. I leaned forward, heart pounding, and took a picture. It wasn't much, just 2 people walking. But it was the first breadcrumb, and I wasn't about to stop there. They didn't kiss. They didn't do anything overt. But her body language screamed history, screamed intimacy. She hugged him like someone who knew his scent, who knew the curve of his back. That hug said more than any kiss would have. Then she got in her car and drove off. He waited until she was gone, then walked back inside the building. I didn't go home right away. I sat there in my car for a while, hands on the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do. The easy thing would be to confront her. Blow up. Scream. But that wouldn't fix anything. I wanted answers. I wanted control. I needed to figure out what the hell was happening before I burned it all down. I drove back to that building the next morning, watched from a cafe across the street. Around noon, he came out again, this time with a briefcase and a Bluetooth headset, talking like he owned the sidewalk. I followed him on foot, careful, quiet, until he stopped at a place called Brennan and Tate, Boutique Consulting. Fancy lettering, gold logo, one of those startup-style offices with floor-to-ceiling windows and no souls inside. Now I had a name, a location, a routine. I went home and Tessa was in the kitchen, sipping tea like she hadn't just spent last night in another man's arms. She asked about my day. I said it was fine. She smiled. I smiled back. But inside, I was already building the war plan. You never think it'll happen to you. You never think you'll be the one tracing steps and collecting evidence like some amateur detective in a cheap Netflix special. But there I was, documenting my wife's affair like a job. Because that's what it became. My full-time job, from that moment on, was exposing the woman I loved for who she really was. And I was just getting started. I didn't sleep the night before. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me, curled under the blanket like nothing was wrong. She shifted in her sleep once, maybe twice, mumbled something I couldn't make out, then adjusted her pillow and fell back into whatever dream world she was comfortable in. I wasn't. I stared at the outline of the fan blades spinning above, counting how many different ways I could confront her and wondering which one would break her composure first. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to make a scene. I wanted her to unravel under the weight of her own lies. The next morning, I made breakfast like usual. Eggs, toast, coffee. The ritual we'd repeated hundreds of times before. She walked into the kitchen in a sweatshirt and leggings, hair up, bare feet padding across the tile like it was any other Thursday. She kissed my cheek and thanked me for the coffee, then sat down and started scrolling her phone. I waited until she had taken a bite of toast. "So, how's Armin?" I asked it flat, casual, like I was asking about a mutual friend we hadn't seen in a while. She froze with the toast halfway to her mouth. Her eyes flicked up to mine, and for a second, I saw it. The moment of panic. She blinked, set the toast down, and tilted her head. "Who?" she said. I wasn't going to let her off the hook that easy. "The guy with the gray jacket. The one you spent Tuesday afternoon with. You remember. Kendall Square, Theater 6, Row J. You saw a film together. I think he's the same guy who owns that place on Beacon Street. Or are you going to tell me that was another client doing you a favor?" Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She reached for her water, took a sip, then looked out the window like something outside would give her the script she needed. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't blink. "You went through my stuff?" she asked, voice low. "No," I said, still calm. "You left your mess in the open. You brought it home, put it on my chair, and lied to my face. That jacket was the first clue. Then I saw you meet him. I followed you to that building. Brennan and Tate. Boutique Consulting, right?" She stood up. "You followed me." Now her voice was sharper, indignant, trying to flip it on me like I was the one out of line. "You actually stalked me? Are you serious right now?" I stood up too. "Serious enough to know you've been meeting him for weeks. Serious enough to know that yoga class doesn't exist. Serious enough to know what time you left, what time you got back, and how long you stayed inside that building with him. Don't turn this around on me." Her jaw clenched. She crossed her arms over her chest and leaned against the counter like she was trying to look composed, but her breathing had changed. Faster. Shallow. She looked cornered. "You don't know what's going on," she said finally. "You don't understand." "Then explain it," I said, "because I'd love to know how lying, sneaking around, and spending your evenings with some overaged clown who wears his cologne like it's 2005 qualifies as anything other than cheating." She looked like she was about to explode. Her face twisted in frustration, and then the tears started. Not quiet ones, not guilt-soaked, just pure frustration. Angry tears. She pushed her hair back, wiped her face hard, and said, "It wasn't supposed to be anything. I didn't plan it. He was just there. I was tired of everything being the same. You, the house, our routine, everything. It was like I couldn't breathe anymore. I needed something different." "Different?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So you sleep with a different man behind my back because you got bored? You couldn't breathe? Do you even hear yourself?" "It wasn't about him," she snapped. "It was about me. I needed something that wasn't this. So you blew up your marriage for what? A midlife crisis with a LinkedIn profile? She shoved past me, storming into the living room. I followed. She turned around fast, pointing at me like she had a defense worth hearing. You don't know what it's like, she said. You've been comfortable, always focused on your work, your little projects, acting like everything's fine when it's not. You stopped seeing me, Kevin. You were here, but not really. I needed something real. I stopped seeing you. I couldn't believe the audacity. I built this life with you. I supported everything you wanted. Your job, your schedule, your independence. I gave you space when you asked for it. I cooked. I cleaned. I waited up for you. And you repay me by sneaking off for hotel rendezvous with a guy who probably charges his clients by the hour to pretend he gives a damn. She didn't say anything. She stared at the floor, jaw tight, breathing heavy. I took a step closer. I want you to pack your things, I said. I want you to go stay with one of your friends. Or him, if he's dumb enough to take you in. But you're not sleeping under this roof tonight. You're kicking me out. No, I said. You already left. I'm just reminding you to take your stuff with you. She didn't cry this time. She didn't beg or say sorry. She just stood there, red-eyed, still trying to hold some dignity like she wasn't already covered in lies. I watched her walk upstairs without another word. 15 minutes later, I heard the wheels of a suitcase dragging down the stairs. She didn't say goodbye, just opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and closed it behind her. I stood there in the quiet, staring at the door she'd walked through, feeling nothing. Not sadness, not anger, not even relief. Just emptiness. Like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room, and all that was left was silence. And I still hadn't even started getting even. I didn't plan the revenge overnight. It wasn't something I rushed into, not because I had second thoughts or felt guilty, but because I wanted it to land in the exact spot it would hurt the most. Tessa didn't deserve a screaming match or a dramatic confrontation on a street corner. She deserved to have her world collapse in the same way she made mine fall apart. Quietly, efficiently, and with enough precision that she wouldn't even realize it until it was too late. That's what I was after. Not some emotional closure. I wanted control back. The first thing I did was make a copy of everything. Her browser history, her emails, the photos I'd snapped of her and Armin outside that building, the calendar events labeled with fake names and business appointments that matched up with hotel reservations. I didn't need to imagine what they were doing. I had the receipts. She'd been sloppy, or maybe arrogant. Either way, it worked in my favor. I compressed everything into a zip file, named it something boring like Tax Docs 2022, and dropped it on a USB drive. That was step one. Step two was reaching out to someone I never thought I'd talk to again, her old boss, Lila. Tessa left her previous agency on bad terms about a year ago, but I knew Lila hated her in that professional, gritted teeth kind of way people do when someone outshines them just enough to make it personal. I emailed her from a burner address, attached a couple of screenshots, and ended the message with one line. Thought you'd want to know who Brennan and Tate are really working with. I knew Tessa had been trying to get back into Lila's company for months after realizing the boutique firm didn't have the reach she wanted. That window was now slammed shut. Next was Armin. I found his LinkedIn, saw the list of clients he boasted about, and picked the one with the most recognizable name. I called the company and asked to speak with their director of compliance, then said, I think someone on your consultant roster is engaging in personal relationships with relocation agents and influencing housing contracts. I have documentation. I can send it anonymously. I gave them nothing more than the facts, names, dates, photos, just enough to make him look like a liability. I never heard back, but that wasn't the point. I didn't need confirmation. I just needed to plant the seed of doubt in a world where even the rumor of impropriety was enough to ruin a deal. That seed would grow on its own. Then came the real piece of work. Our condo wasn't fully in both our names. When we bought it, Tessa's credit wasn't great, so we agreed to put it in my name while she paid half the mortgage. We were planning to refinance once her score improved, but that never happened. Lucky me. I went to the bank, locked down access, froze joint accounts, pulled my half of the savings into a new account, and set alerts for every transaction on the credit cards. I let her pay for dinner one night with a card that was no longer valid. That was just for me. I needed to see the look on her face when her independence suddenly hit a wall. She called 2 days after I froze everything. I let it ring out. She called again. I waited. Third time, I picked up. Kevin, what is going on? I just got embarrassed at a restaurant. I'm sorry, who is this? I said it flat, not sarcastic, just dry enough to let her know I was in no mood for this. She didn't even try to argue. You can't just lock me out of our money. I paid into that account too. You cheated, lied, and walked out. You don't get to keep the perks. She took a sharp breath, like she was about to launch into some explanation, but I cut her off. You can talk to my lawyer if you think you have a claim. Otherwise, we're done here. You're being spiteful. No, I said. I'm being methodical. She hung up. I stared at the phone for a while after that, not because I had doubts, but because I hadn't felt that calm in weeks. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was clarity. For the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting to her. I was moving the pieces. A few days later, she came by to pick up more of her things. She didn't ask permission. Just knocked on the door like she still lived there. I let her in. She didn't say anything at first. Just moved around the living room collecting books, shoes, little decorations she insisted on taking with her. Finally, she stopped near the kitchen table, looked at the chair where the jacket had been, and said, "Is this really how it ends?" I looked at her. "This ended the second you started pretending I didn't matter. You think revenge makes you better than me?" "No," I said. "But it makes us even." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just nodded, picked up her bags, and walked out without another word. I watched her go again. This time, there wasn't any sadness left. No anger either. Just silence. And that was enough. 3 weeks went by without a word. I kept expecting something, an email, a letter, maybe even a pathetic attempt to send a mutual friend as a go-between. But nothing came. Not even a knock. The silence was strange at first, then it became background noise. I went to work, came home, ate alone, watched TV, cleaned, didn't bother replacing her spot at the table. It was easier than I thought it would be. But deep down I knew it couldn't last like that forever. Eventually, we were going to have to sit down and talk. Not for closure. Not to reconnect. Just to face it like adults and finish what she started. That moment came on a Sunday afternoon when I opened the door to take the trash out and saw her standing at the bottom of the stairs. She didn't say anything at first, just looked up at me with that nervous, blank face people wear when they know they've got nothing left to bargain with. I held the bag in one hand and stared at her, debating whether I should just shut the door and go back inside. But something stopped me. Not compassion, not curiosity. Just a need to hear whatever weak explanation she had prepared. I opened the door wider. "If you've got something to say, make it quick." She walked up slowly, keeping her distance. She looked thinner, more tired than usual. Her hair was tied up in a way that looked thrown together, not styled like she usually wore it. She stopped a few feet away and took a breath. "I'm not here to fight." "Good," I said. "Because I'm done fighting. I wanted to talk. Not argue. Just talk." I tossed the trash bag into the bin and walked back inside without saying a word. She followed me in quietly. I sat down at the kitchen table. She didn't sit right away. She looked around like she was trying to feel something. Like the furniture was supposed to respond to her presence. Then she finally pulled out a chair and sat down. "I know I can't fix it," she said. "I'm not here for that. I needed to say some things out loud." I didn't stop her. I just sat back and waited. I wasn't happy, Kevin. Not for a while. I didn't even know how to say it. You were here, but you weren't really here with me. You were always working or zoning out or doing your own thing. I know that's not an excuse for what I did. I'm not trying to justify it. I just wanted you to understand how I felt before it all fell apart. You could have said something before you started sleeping with someone else. I didn't plan for that to happen. You didn't stop it either." She went quiet again. I could tell she wanted to push back, but even she knew it wouldn't hold. I wasn't giving her anything to fight with. She reached for her water bottle, one she brought herself, and took a slow sip before continuing. "I thought maybe if I could feel something again, I'd come back and we'd fix it. I didn't expect it to get serious. I didn't expect it to change how I saw us. But it did. You thought cheating on me would help you fall back in love with me? That's what you're going with. I don't know what I thought. I just know I was empty and I didn't know how to tell you. So you filled the silence with someone else." She didn't answer that. She looked at her hands, folded in her lap, as if they might have something more useful to offer than her mouth. I let the silence sit. I wanted her to feel the same stillness I'd lived with since the day she walked out. "I never hated you," she said. "Even now. I know what I did was selfish. I know I hurt you in a way I can't undo. But I never stopped caring about you. You cared enough to lie. Cared enough to fake dinners, fake phone calls, fake yoga classes. Cared enough to bring home another man's jacket and act like it was nothing. I panicked, she said. I didn't know how to stop. It felt like the more I tried to hold everything together, the more it slipped. And by the time I realized how deep I was, it was too late. Too late for what? For being honest. For fixing it. I shook my head. You don't fix this. You don't glue back a broken marriage with half-truths and apologies after the fact. She nodded. I know. We sat there for a while, neither of us talking. She looked like she wanted to cry, but nothing came out. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe she'd already cried herself dry. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel much at all. I'd already emptied myself out in the days after she left. This was just the part where the dust settled. I'm going to file next week, I said. No alimony. No dragging this out. Just clean. You get what you brought in, and I'll keep the place. She nodded. I won't fight you on it. I already started moving your stuff to a storage unit. The keys in the envelope near the door. Don't leave anything behind. I don't want to keep finding pieces of you in my house. She looked up then, eyes glassy, voice low. Do you hate me? No, I said. Hating you would mean I still care. I don't. I just want you gone. She stood up slowly, like her body was heavier than usual. She walked to the door, picked up the envelope, turned to say something else, then stopped herself. Maybe she realized nothing she said would matter anymore. Maybe she just couldn't find the words. Either way, she opened the door and stepped out. I didn't watch her leave. The paperwork was thicker than I expected. It sat on the dining table in a manila envelope, the one I picked up from the lawyer's office the day after Tessa and I had that last conversation. No dramatic courtroom scenes, no shouting match, just a bunch of papers with boxes to check and lines to sign. The lawyer had gone through every step with me, clear and methodical. The divorce would be uncontested. There were no kids, no shared business, no real property dispute beyond the condo, and even that was clean since it was only under my name. It was going to be quick, as far as these things go. I sat there for hours that night, just staring at the lines. I already knew I would sign them, but I still needed to feel the weight of it before I did. It was strange how easy it was to erase a marriage legally. You spend years building something with someone, you intertwine your lives, you share routines and secrets and arguments and birthdays, and then one signature turns it all into a before and after story. I didn't feel sad about it anymore. What I felt was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that settles into your muscles when you've carried something too long and finally get to set it down. The day I dropped the signed forms back off, the receptionist barely looked up when she took the envelope. I walked out of the office into the sunlight, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel anything pulling at me. No guilt, no doubt, not even relief. Just silence. It was done. I went home, poured a drink, and sat in the living room that used to be ours. I didn't even turn the TV on. I just sat there, taking it all in. It was strange how the same couch, the same rug, the same coffee table could look so different when you knew no one else would be using them with you. A few days later, Tessa texted me. Just one line. Can we meet? One last time. I thought about ignoring it, but something told me it wasn't about begging or apologies. I replied with a location and time. Neutral ground, a quiet coffee shop a few blocks from where she was staying. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the back. She looked worse than before, hair messier, circles under her eyes darker, clothes less put together. I sat across from her and waited. No handshake, no small talk. I got the papers, she said. I'm signing them tonight. I nodded. Good. She looked down at her cup, hands wrapped tight around it like she was cold. I didn't expect this to end so fast. You ended it. I just followed through. I know. We sat in silence again. She sipped her coffee. I didn't order anything. I had nothing to say unless she gave me a reason to speak. I just wanted to say that I never stopped thinking about you, she said. Even after everything. Even now. I shook my head. That doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. That's your problem. She didn't argue. She just looked at me, tired, regretful, like she finally realized that some things can't be repaired just because you regret breaking them. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. It's not much, she said, sliding it across the table. Some cash. I know you said you didn't want anything from me, but it's my part of the bills for this month. I don't want to owe you anything. I didn't touch it. I'll transfer it back. Don't, she said quickly. Just take it. Please. I looked at her, not as the woman I married, but as someone I used to know. She wasn't the same person who shared my home, my bed, my plans. That person stopped existing the day she decided to step out and lie about it. What sat across from me now was just someone trying to clean up a mess she couldn't handle. "I'm not going to stay in Boston," she said. "I think I'm going to go stay with my sister in Arizona for a while. Do whatever you want. I just thought you'd want to know." "I don't." She nodded like she expected that answer. Then she stood up slowly, picked up her bag, and looked at me one last time. "Take care of yourself, Kevin." "I already am." She left without saying anything else. I watched her walk out of the cafe, not because I cared where she was going, but because I wanted to make sure she was really gone this time. I stayed there for another minute, then got up, left the envelope of cash on the table, and walked out. It was the last time I saw her. The divorce was finalized 10 days later. A short, sterile email from the lawyer confirmed it. No phone call, no meeting, just a PDF attachment with an official stamp and a subject line that read, "Final Decree, McAllister." I opened the file, looked at it for maybe 15 seconds, then closed it and deleted it. That was it. No more decisions to make, no more explanations to give, no more pretending there was a we. It was just me again, and surprisingly, that thought didn't bother me. What had once been a life built for two now felt better with one. The quiet didn't sting like it used to. I started eating dinner without checking my phone, slept better without her in the bed, and didn't feel the need to keep the second towel on the rack. I wasn't looking for peace or closure or anything poetic. I just wanted to feel like I wasn't carrying something anymore. And slowly, I got there. I threw out what needed to be thrown out, her half-used skin products, old magazines, a pair of shoes she left in the closet. I donated the dresses she forgot to pack. I deleted the shared calendar and changed every saved password she ever had access to. It wasn't an emotional purge. It was cleaning. And it felt like taking control back, one item at a time. I didn't throw a party or announce anything. I just kept moving forward. The hardest part, surprisingly, wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the cheating or the lies or even the look on her face when I confronted her. It was realizing how easy it is for people to lie to someone who trusts them. That's what stuck with me. The fact that someone who knew everything about you could still choose to hurt you with full awareness. She didn't cheat because I was distant or unavailable or inattentive. She cheated because she could. She knew I would believe her. She knew I'd ask no questions. And when people think you'll never challenge them, that's when they decide what they really think of you. I kept working like usual. The studio became less of a workplace and more of a place to focus, to keep the mind occupied when the thoughts tried to creep back in. I stopped checking her social media. At first, I wanted to know what she was doing, if she was still with him, if she regretted anything. But it didn't take long to realize that it didn't matter. Whether she was miserable or thriving didn't change what she did. It didn't rewrite anything. Letting go wasn't some dramatic epiphany. It was a slow, dull decision I made every day, until eventually, I didn't think about her in the morning anymore. One night, a friend invited me out to a bar. Just a few people from the studio, nothing fancy. I didn't want to go at first. The idea of small talk and pretending to care about someone else's dating drama seemed exhausting. But I went anyway. We talked, we drank, we laughed about nothing. And for the first time in months, I didn't think about Tessa. Not once. Not when the music played, not when I paid the bill, not when I walked home. That night was when I knew I'd actually let go, not because I said it, not because I wanted to believe it, but because I lived it. There was nothing left to unpack. The anger, the confusion, the frustration, it had all burned out. Now, if someone asks about her, I just say we split and leave it at that. No story, no bitterness, no lingering resentment. She's just someone I used to be married to. That's all. I don't hate her. I don't wish her well, either. I just don't care. And that's the part people don't understand until they've gone through it themselves. Real closure isn't getting answers. It's when the questions stop matching. The lesson wasn't about relationships or trust or love. It was about control. About not letting someone else define your worth based on how they treated you. Tessa's betrayal didn't mean I was unworthy. It meant she didn't deserve what I gave her. That's it. And the moment I understood that, I stopped blaming myself. I still sleep on the same side of the bed. I still use the same mug for coffee in the morning. I didn't need a reinvention or a makeover or a fresh start. I just needed space to be myself without someone else poisoning it. And I have that now. No more lies. No more second-guessing. Just me living without the weight of someone else's. So yeah, that's how it ended. Not with a bang, not with drama, but with me walking out of a coffee shop and never looking back. And honestly, that's more satisfying than anything she could have ever said.